I'm Anna,
I'm Jessica.
and this is the Paranoia Pair.
I'm excited because I don't know what this nature is.
Oh, okay. It's actually really fucked up,
Oh, is it a
unfortunately.
cult?
No. Our topic today is the return to nature. It's been all over the news. One of the verdicts just happened, I think, on the 27th or the 28th.
I have no idea what anything is.
So,
This is all news to me.
basically a funeral home where death was not the end for these people. Okay, so I'm going to warn some of these things are going to be kind of graphic. I'm not going to say graphic. It's just really gross.
Okay.
Some of these things are pretty icky.
Okay.
So when we say goodbye to someone we love, we trust the professionals obviously handling the remains to treat them with dignity and care and respect. So I'm going to take you all through the many layers to this return to nature funeral home. So the Return to Nature Funeral Home started in Colorado Springs, and it was founded in 2017 by a couple named John and Carrie Halford. John actually grew up in the business. His father owned a funeral home in Oklahoma. So he, I would say, has a pretty good understanding because he grew up around it. Carrie, on the other hand, had no experience other than dating multiple people who were in the trade of having a funeral home.
So how do you meet not one but at least two?
Yeah.
How do you
And it's extra funny because her husband, John, actually pointed that out in a video they did together for their business.
it has to sound like she's looking for these people.
So the facility was promoted as a green burial alternative, meaning that they didn't use any embalming fluids and they used biodegradable caskets. And it was really targeted to eco-conscious individuals, which is pretty common, especially I would say for our generation. And it's a growing trend in people under 40. And so not only was it eco-friendly, but it was also pretty budget-friendly compared to traditional services. They later expanded to Penrose, Colorado in 2019, which is just 2 hours south of Denver. It was named Best Funeral Home by the Colorado Springs Gazette in 2020. But in 2023, the truth would be revealed. So another funeral director of an eco-friendly facility noticed that the Return to Nature building in Penrose was starting to look a bit run down. There was weeds growing in the parking lot, and there was a bunch of debris around the building. And she actually offered to take care of their parking lot and all the weeds and stuff in exchange and being able to store some equipment there at the building in the back. And John rejected her offer, saying that they were going to be subletting the building out in April. On October 3rd, neighbors reported a foul odor at the Penrose location, which prompted a welfare check by the Fremont County Sheriff's Office. So they actually contacted John Halford, and they agreed to meet with the authorities and give them a walkthrough of the facility to make sure that things were running the way they were supposed to, because it's a funeral home and it's smelling, so something's probably not right. He explained on the phone to them, though, that the smell was because he was practicing taxidermy on the property. And there was even a sign that said that they were practicing taxidermy.
I don't think taxidermy's smelly. I feel like it just smells like embalming stuff.
Well, if they were getting like multiple calls.
Is this the one where they just left all the bodies?
Yeah. So they agreed to meet the next day on October 4th, but John never showed up. So the sheriff's office obtained a warrant later that day, and they came back that night. And then they opened the doors, and they found 191 bodies stacked everywhere. They were stacked on top of each other and scattered across different rooms. The bodies were wrapped in plastic body bags and stored in cardboard boxes and plastic totes. Some of them were just in a pile.
That's crazy.
They were also in various stages of decomposition. The bodies included fetuses, infants, and adults. And the building where the bodies were stored is also described as being infested with bugs, rats, mold, and fungus that were feasting on the bodies. So the FBI got involved into the investigation, and the agents had to go in wearing hazmat suits And they also had to recopy their notes after leaving the building onto a new pad of paper because the smell was so bad it leached into their notes. And they also had to replace all of the cameras used to photograph the building
Why the cameras?
because the smell leached into the equipment.
Really?
Yeah. The FBI called in a septic company to come clean the fluids that were on the floor because there was so much of it, and they actually had to put down cardboard on the floor so they wouldn't slip in it.
That's crazy.
There was also foil and curtains on all the windows and doors to prevent anyone from seeing inside the building and seeing what was happening. And the law requires bodies to be embalmed, cremated, refrigerated, or given to science within 24 to 48 hours. But obviously, these things were not happening here. Most of the bodies they processed were for cremation, and they didn't have the equipment to do that there. So they would transport the bodies to a different facility or company to do the cremation for them. And for whatever reason, they were just holding on to these people. They weren't transporting them or anything. So
What's their like? What was their end game? I guess I wonder. Like, what did they think was going to happen with
I
them
don't
just
know.
leaving everybody in there?
Well, I'll get into it like a little bit at the end, but I am already preparing myself to be doing a second part to this story because
Oh, so it's not finished.
right, because there's still trials and stuff that are going to be going on until September.
Okay.
So, the next action was identifying who these people were and contacting their families. And investigators used a combination of fingerprints, dental records, and DNA testing, and they worked with the El Paso and the Fremont County coroners, along with the FBI and the CBI, which is the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. Several remains were too old and too decomposed for easy ID, meaning that DNA would be the only route. This also meant that it would take weeks or even months in some of these cases to find out who these people were. Because of how many bodies there were, it was pretty overwhelming. And to make it a bit easier to figure out who these people were, um, they issued a public call for families to come forward if they used the Return to Nature funeral home services. They were then asked to complete FBI forms online or call local hotlines. Over 120 families reached out to figure out if their loved one was one of the almost 200 bodies. Investigators also contacted families individually, often by phone first, and then later delivering more detailed updates as the remains were identified. A victim assistance was also coordinated, including crisis hotlines, family resource centers, and local support teams to help the families cope. Many of these families started to recall troubling red flags they experienced while working with this funeral home. Some reported that communication was inconsistent or abruptly cut off after the payments were made. Others noticed that death certificates were delayed or contained suspicious errors like incorrect cremation dates. A few families questioned why urns were returned without proper labeling or documentation, and why receipts lacked basic business details. And one woman remembered that staff seemed overwhelmed and disorganized, while another noted the unusual look and feel of the ashes she received. I also remember reading this person's like recount of everything kept getting pushed back. Like they were like, "Hey, when are we gonna get these ashes? Like, is everything going to plan?" They're like, "Oh, we like had a bit of a hiccup, like something like got pushed back or whatever." I think this was like around the time that they were moving locations. So when they opened up the Penrose location, like, "Oh, we're moving locations, so we're a bit busy." And then they even offered to like come to the location to pick up the ashes. And then Carrie, who she was in contact with, was telling her that no, that she wasn't allowed to.
That's so weird.
Hmm.
Both of my parents were cremated, and I want to say that their ashes were returned like within a week.
Yeah, it shouldn't take too long.
Maybe not even that long. I don't remember. Because I know I picked up my dad's ashes, but it didn't seem it might not even been a week for my dad. I don't know. That doesn't take that long though.
So at the time, they brushed off these concerns because they assumed that the Halfords were busy because they're running two locations now. So on October 24th, 2023, a woman named Christina Page was contacted. Her son, David Jackson Page, had been identified as one of the bodies in the return to nature facility. He had been dumped out of his body bag and into a corner of the non-functioning
Oh
refrigeration
my
unit
god.
by John Halford.
My god.
She's completely shocked to hear this because her son had been dead for 4 years and she had received his quote ashes and she spread them across the country and she had been wearing a small vial of his ashes around her neck since then.
Oh my
Every
god.
day. There's no way to test these remains because once the bodies are cremated, all the DNA has been lost. So now, every family who had their loved ones cremated is left to wonder if they actually received their loved ones or someone else's.
Or anyone at all.
Mhm. Well, another woman named Heather DeWolf, her son Zachary Alexander DeWolf died in 2020. She heard the news and she decided she was going to take a closer look at the ashes. And her and her other son were kind of moving the bag around to kind of like inspect them. And they found a metal disc in her bag that she got. And her son didn't have any medical devices in his body. He had no surgeries, he had no medical devices in there. So she believes she has someone else's ashes and she doesn't know who. And there's no way to locate who has her son's ashes because on top of getting a bag that probably did not contain her son's ashes, her son had not been one of the people who had been identified as one of the bodies in the facility.
Oh no.
Yeah. So many families who had paid for cremation services were given sealed urns, and they were told those urns held their loved ones' ashes. The story gets worse for the families because inside the facility, there were bags of Quickcrete, which is quick drying concrete, and a machine that ground that powder up. And some families noticed that the urn contents weren't typical ash. One daughter was a physician, and she took a sample and tested it by adding water to it, and it hardened into a solid block when it was mixed with the water. So she got concrete.
Oh my god.
Some others got second opinions from licensed funeral directors from other homes, and they stated that the material was unusually fine and dark and not consistent with real remains. So, after the initial discovery of the nearly 200 bodies, the funeral homes that were listed by the Return to Nature facility on the death certificates. So, these funeral homes are listed on the certificates because they're getting sent out to another company to do the cremations. So that company is listed because they did the cremation.
Quote unquote did the cremations.
Yeah. So they were receiving phone calls from concerned families and they flagged discrepancies on death certificates listing cremations months after the Return to Nature stopped performing them. So, here's the kicker. So, for nearly 12 months, the Halfords were running this green funeral home without a legal license because their license expired in November of 2022 and they didn't renew it. So, they were still running as a funeral home illegally.
My god.
From December of 2022 through October 2023, they handled bodies and took payments and issued urns completely unchecked. Between late 2019 and the fall of 2023, the couple scammed hundreds of families who came to them for funeral services, and they charged between $900 to $1,400 for cremations and even more for burials. They received $193,000 from 190 families.
That doesn't even seem like from the scammy aspect, that doesn't
Mhm.
even seem worth it to do all this shit just for a little less than $200,000.
Yeah, well, this is just for the bodies that they weren't taking care of. Instead of honoring their contracts, they just left the bodies to decay in their warehouse. And on top of running a funeral home without a license, John and Carrie Halford were falling behind on rent at their Colorado Springs location months before this whole thing was blown up. So in early 2023, the Return to Nature Funeral Homes was served an eviction for their Colorado Springs facility after failing to not pay rent. And according to court documents, they owed several months' worth of back rent. The Halfords were also being sued by creditors, vendors, and clients and had unpaid tax liens and business debts totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars. So while this is all happening, the families are wondering, where the fuck are the Halfords? And why are they not arrested? Well, they decided that instead of meeting the authorities from earlier, they were just gonna quickly pack their things and turn off their cell phones and leave. The sheriff's office had a press conference and they stated that the Halfords were cooperative.
So they lied?
Mhm. And I think they lied because they knew how outraged people were going to be.
Be hard for me to, like, not go up there and be like, "Yeah, these fucking little pussies, like, ran away.
Yeah.
We don't know where they're at."
Mhm. While people are searching online, they discovered that John decided he was going to dabble in stand-up comedy. He would travel to Texas and California to perform on stage. It wasn't funny at all. It was bad. It
Was it
was
under
real
his
bad.
actual name too?
I think so. And it was not good. It's like worse than this podcast, if you can believe it. It was horrible.
Really?
Yeah. They also dug up that he tried running for a seat on the Muskogee City Council in Oklahoma. His campaign didn't go very well though.
Before, after, or during this?
This is before.
Okay.
Um this was like a little I think this was like right after he got out of college, and this was before he decided he was going to I think this is even before he met his wife. Um, but he and some friends thought it would be funny to pull a prank where they showed up to a slumber party wearing masks, and they broke into the house and they pointed guns to the women's head. The guns were AK-47s.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
That is I was imagining handguns, not a
No,
fucking
no, no, these were AK-47s.
Jesus.
He pled guilty to a misdemeanor charge, and he only got community service.
What?
Mhm.
So did he know the women whose slumber
I
party?
believe he may have known at least one, but it was him and a group of friends, so I'm wondering if maybe the friends knew them from, like, college or something. But it was all women.
That's crazy. And also, I don't know why people would do these things because, like, imagine they were women who had guns
Yeah.
and like that's crazy that you would even think to do that.
Mhm.
That right there should lose your right to even own firearms using them like that. That is not responsible.
Yeah. So the Halfords were first arrested in November 2023 after the FBI was notified that they were out of state. They figured out they were staying at John Halford's father's house in Oklahoma, and they are being charged with 191 counts of corpse abuse. They were also charged with over 50 forgery counts, 5 theft counts, and 4 money laundering counts. And the couple admitted guilty to a few of those last year. In early 2024, the Halfords were released on bond. They stayed in a hotel in the area and delivered food. I'm assuming something like DoorDash or Uber Eats. Um, and that was so they could make money.
Sorry. I feel like we need better background checks on food
Yeah.
delivery services if
Yeah.
that's the case.
Especially if they have someone who has a misdemeanor and it's a gun charge.
Yeah. And like I feel like the services should know if you have any active ongoing like
Mhm.
possible criminal
Yeah.
records. Like someone got a Subway sandwich from someone who has abused 181 corpses. That's crazy.
Yeah. And they're handling your food.
They need better background checks.
Yeah. The families were actually like really pissed off when they found that out because they're like, okay, so what happens if he comes and delivers my food?
Yeah.
Then he knows where I live. He already had like he,
Probable cause or whatever.
he can basically this gives him an opportunity to be able to like harass his victims. So in April 2024, where the feds came back with more charges, this time for lying on their 2020 application for COVID-19 relief funds. In the application, he claimed the business wasn't in violation of any law, and they were given $882,300.
What?
Almost $1 million they were given.
And they're behind on their rent?
Mhm. So
So they're basically up to they've made $1 million
Basically, yeah.
off
And
this.
what do they do with all of that money when they have a failing business? They spend it on things like a GMC Yukon and an Infiniti that's worth over $120,000 combined.
Okay, okay, pause. I'm not condoning, but if I was scamming people out of money
Mhm,
and on the run,
mhm. Well, this is before they were on the run.
oh,
This is 2020.
I would have
So
just bought.
3 years before, only a year after they opened their Penrose facility.
Okay, because I was gonna say I would buy like a houseboat,
Mhm.
and then you just go into international waters and
Well,
live
that
your
would be
life.
smarter than all this shit that they bought.
Well, why do you need a Yukon?
Oh, it gets better though. They also bought $31,000 in cryptocurrency. They bought luxury items from stores like Gucci and Tiffany and Co. They bought plastic surgery, multiple vacations, entertainment, fancy dinners, and tuition for their child because they have children.
At least they did one good thing with the money.
They also made payments to other vendors unrelated to their business, though.
See, I'd like to think, like, imagine if you and I got $800,000. These people are buying like name brand cars, Gucci, the corn dogs and Taco Bell you would eat. We would fuck up Walmart. I just know we would the dumbest shit. Gucci, I
And
don't give a shit
Goodwill.
about Gucci.
We're going to Goodwill.
Yes.
We're hitting up so many garage sales.
Five Below. Oh my
Yes.
god. I'm gonna tear that up.
Antique stores.
I didn't even think about the antique stores,
Oh
Anna.
my God.
We're getting a Victorian house.
Yes. So the couple's bond was revoked, though, after they put in their guilty pleas. So John Halford pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit wire fraud and on June 27th of this year, so like a couple days ago, received a 20-year federal prison sentence, which was the maximum allowed.
I mean, he's what, middle aged?
I don't know exactly how old he is, like something.
As if he's got a kid in college, he's got to at least be 40.
Mhm. He also had a lawsuit against him by the families, and he was ordered to pay over $1 million in restitution to them. So during the trial, prosecutors shared a screenshot from security footage taken inside the Penrose funeral home on September 9th of 2023. In it, John Halford is seen rolling a cart with a dead body on it. And according to the FBI, the video shows him dumping the body on the floor and just walking out with the empty cart. So only a month before it was reported that the smell was coming from
If it
the
stunk
facility.
that bad, how could he tolerate?
Yeah.
Like,
Um
how used to that is he?
so they introduced bank statements showing that the couple had bought 660 pounds of quickcrete from Home Depot. Not exactly standard for a funeral home. Then came the forgery charges, 61 counts tied to fake death certificates. Christopher Adams from the Colorado Bureau of Investigations testified that while many were found, only 61 of them fell within the statute of limitations. I don't know why there's a limitation on faking a death certificate.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I feel like I don't know. I feel like the statute of limitations is just like a kick in the face to victims.
So, these certificates falsely claimed that the bodies had been buried or cremated when they hadn't. They also I want to know what the fuck their statute of limitations is real quick. It's only 2 years. They also shared text exchanges between John and Carrie. One that was dated on May 5th of 2020 read, "My one and only focus is keeping us out of jail. What's yours?" In 2020. They just opened their facility.
How do you even make these plans?
I don't know. In another one from August 12th of 2023, John said, "I'd like to get all the bodies out before Claire comes and visits." Later that same day, he added, "While I was making the transfer, I got people juice on me."
Oh, that's a terrible way to talk about it.
Yeah, and there also in the documentary it said that this would be kind of like a regular occurrence for him because he was constantly texting his wife being like, Can you pick me up, like, some Burger King or something to eat because I got people juice in my mouth and I wanna get the taste out."
In your mouth?
Yeah.
How do people like this find each other?
I don't know, but they deserve each other, and I hope they both rot in prison. Another text from John to Carrie seems to discuss ways to get rid of the bodies.
I don't know, maybe do what you were supposed to do with them?
Yeah. It read, options. A, build a new machine ASAP. B, dig a hole and use lye. And it says where, question mark. C, dig a small hole and build a large fire.
The irony of a funeral director or a mortician, whatever he is,
Mhm.
uh, texting his wife about how to get rid of bodies,
Mhm.
it's just a strange thing.
Yeah. Well, he was on the right track with this one because option D is I go to prison, which is probably going to happen. Prosecutors also pointed out that Carrie's internet search history included ways to avoid getting caught. So Carrie initially pleaded guilty, but she ended up withdrawing it. And now she waits a September 2025 federal trial. And her state sentencing for the 191 abuse of corpse charges is still pending for a set date. John's, however, is scheduled for August. Um, Also, I want to go back. When they said build a new machine in the documentary, the only place I could see it was in the documentary, nothing else, like no news articles or like media outlets said anything about it. There's a lady who came forward in the documentary who said she was his mistress. And she was talking to him. He brought up um that he wanted to build a hydro cremation machine because it's like a new thing. So you don't have to deal with the fire or anything.
Mhm.
You use the water. It, he was actually building that in his facility. There is a machine that it's like a it kind of looks like a keg because I seen that in the documentary and then I was putting the report together and I came across the text exchange with all the options and I'm like, "Oh my god," because the documentary came out before the trial. So maybe she was actually the mistress cuz like how would she know that? I mean,
I hope she was the mistress because that means more dramas to ensue because then the wife is probably gonna start turning on
mhm.
him.
Yeah. And in the documentary the way that the mistress and John met was because her dad had died.
Was he one of
And I don't know if he was in there or if he had actually been properly taken care of. Um, it didn't say, uh, but yeah, he just kept contacting her after then he came over and so April 16th of 2024, the Return to Nature funeral home in Penrose, Colorado, was demolished. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency determined that demolition of the building was necessary to safely remove the biological and hazardous materials found in the building. So it was also so bad, they had to prepare the site for demolition by spraying a disinfectant and odor suppressant inside of the building and get rid of all of the rodents. Once the building and concrete foundation slab were removed, the EPA did a shallow surface scrape of the soil where the building stood just to make sure they got everything out. Many affected families are advocating for a permanent memorial where the funeral home was. It's still being discussed though about like what it should be. There's a couple ideas about a wildflower meadow and having it be like a meditation garden or have like a winding path, like those labyrinth path things. As of early 2024, the Fremont County coroner confirmed that 15 of the recovered bodies remain unidentified, even after extensive efforts using fingerprints, dental records, and medical hardware in DNA testing. The FBI agents advised some families that they may never know whether their loved ones' remains were recovered or possibly mixed with others. And they may never find out if their urn that they have or even the plot that they were put in the cemetery is their person. So Colorado lawmakers actually moved pretty quickly to prevent this from happening again. In 2024, the state passed new legislation requiring funeral homes to undergo more frequent inspections, maintain stricter body tracking protocols, and submit proof of refrigeration or cremation within 24 to 48 hours after receiving the remains. Funeral homes must also now report closures or operational changes immediately, and licenses will automatically flag if they haven't been renewed. These new regulations aim to close loopholes that allowed the Halfords to operate without oversight for a year. And I'm going to be doing a part two.
That's crazy and heartbreaking.
Awful. So,
So, like, okay, the bodies that were found,
mhm.
were they all meant to be cremated?
Not all of them were meant to be cremated, but the majority of the services they performed were cremations.
So, if they were to be naturally buried, is that something that the family didn't get to participate in? Because, like, normally when someone's buried, the family's there.
But there's also a time period between the funeral and the burial. So unless they just buried an empty casket, I have no clue.
But usually
Or
it's like one.
or what if the caskets got mixed up and they buried the wrong person in the wrong plot? Which I do believe there is a case for them that they buried 2 people in the wrong spot.
I just want to know what their end game was, like what they wanted to happen because like so early on he knew that the risk of going to prison was pretty high.
Mhm.
So like
And he even admitted it in the texting.
what was his what was their goal this whole thing? Just to make money? Like that's crazy.
I have no clue.
And if it wasn't for COVID, they really wouldn't have made that much money.
Mhm.
And I feel like if you're a funeral home, it's not that hard to cremate them and just do the right thing. I don't know.
I'm also getting a feeling that they were probably living above their means because they really put on a show on social media of their fancy vacations and stuff.
So the death certificates, so they sent out the bodies
Mhm.
after being prepped to be cremated by another company, or were they supposed to be doing the cremating?
So they would receive the bodies, refrigerate them, and then send them to a second location for the body to be cremated by a different company that they worked with.
So it wasn't even that difficult. All they
Yeah.
had to do was just send the
They
body.
just had to transport the body, and they just weren't doing that
That's
because
ridiculous.
they would have to then pay the people who are cremating the body for their services.
So, was well, if you want to be a dick, just raise your prices.
Yeah.
Like, just be a dick that way. So then did the other company that was supposedly getting the bodies, like, did they have anything to say about it?
I do believe they were getting sued by people who were doing the cremations for them for not getting paid.
Okay, that's crazy and very sad.
And they're mixing up the body cremains.
And like every death is sad, but the stories about the moms whose sons died,
Mhm.
or like just because you're not supposed to lose your children. Like it's a given you're going to lose your parents and your grandma
Yeah.
and stuff like that, but like you're not supposed to lose your kids. So the thought of them holding on to what they thought was what they had left of their child
Mhm.
just for it to not even be their baby.
And this lady doesn't even know whose remains she's been wearing around her neck for
Yeah,
the past, like, 4 years.
that's crazy. I like to imagine that my necklace I have with some of my mom's ashes is just like her big toe or something. I get a kick out of that thought. Thanks for listening.
If you enjoyed this episode, you can find us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook at Paranoia Pair Pod, and we will see you next Friday.
Stay spooky.
Bye.
Consider doing